What's going on YouTube? My name is Nick. Welcome to the Nick Snacks 3D YouTube channel. This is my first ever video for what I'm hoping is going to be a good source of information for the 3D printing community, whether you're an established member or you're out there right now looking at buying your very first printer. I definitely don't know the most out there, but YouTube was such a great resource for me as I got started a couple of years ago. Thanks to videos by wonderful creators like Frankly Built, Uncle Jesse, Faux Hammer, and so many more. So I've reached that point of my printing career where I'd like to try and share a little bit about my experiences along the way as well, in the hopes that they might help you too. So what can you expect if you hit that subscribe button? I'm not entirely sure just yet, but I've got ideas for things like printer reviews, best practices, filament and resin recommendations, build videos, and more. So if you're curious, please hit those like and subscribe buttons and let me know in the comments what you feel like you've been itching to see out there. Now today, I'm excited to kick things off by reviewing the Creality K2 Plus. This printer is not necessarily fresh to the market, but I feel like that made this an even better opportunity for me to put my thoughts on it out there because I've been using this machine, actually two of these machines, for the better part of 3 months now. So I've been able to run it through the ringer, printing nearly 24/7 since that time. I have seen the best and the worst of this thing, and I want to get into all of that right now. But before we get started, y'all should know that this entire video is a relay of my personal experience with this printer, and if I've learned anything, it's that no two people are going to have the same exact ride. 3D printers are electronics. They have many consumable parts, and just like anything nowadays, things can go wrong in weird, wonky ways. I was not sent this printer. I bought it with my own money, and so we're holding nothing back in terms of what I've experienced. All right, let's start with the good. Chances are, if you bought one of these printers or if you're considering buying one of these printers, you're doing so with really one thing at the top of your wish list, and that's a large build volume. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on specs for these printers because there are so many great launch videos out there that cover those in detail, but at 350 millimeters cubed, this thing is massive. The K2 Plus has actually replaced a couple of Creality K1 Max printers that I had on the workbench, and those things were giant too. So it's not like I was going from the tiniest of build volumes to the larger K2 Plus. But even when comparing the experience from the K1 Max to the K2 Plus, I had a wow moment. I've got a number of printers in my small little farm, some Bamboos, some Crealities, and even an Anycubic Cobra 2 Max. And honestly, it might just be a helpful visual to see all of these build plates next to one another. On the K2 Plus, you have zero issues sending full-size, one-shot helmets, cosplay armor pieces, and more. Now, I mainly do helmets these days, and a great example is this Deadpool helmet from Yosh Studios. This had to be split into at least 3 build plates prior to the K2 Plus, and now I can run the entire thing in one shot. That's been a game changer. Now, another thing that I have been really impressed with on this printer is the out-of-the-box adhesion on the textured PEI plate. I mentioned coming from a couple of K1 Max printers, and I've got to be honest, I had such a tough time getting prints to stick on those machines. I even started to do something that I hadn't done in my 2 years of printing so far to that point. I started using a glue stick. And I had tried everything before that, the smooth PEI sheet, the textured PEI sheet, the golden PEI sheet, nothing held. So you can imagine my skepticism on the larger K2 Plus, but I am here to tell you that I have maybe experienced 2 failures as a result of adhesion issues, and that's even on my larger and taller prints, and let's be honest, probably were user error in terms of slicing the print. I'm also not religious about cleaning my bed with alcohol or soap and water, and I'm fairly clumsy about getting fingerprints and oils all over it, but still these printers have held up. Now, even with that, I'm going to admit that I'm looking forward to a cool plate being released for these machines because I have switched every other printer in the shop over to a CryoGrip offering, even the last K1 Max that I still have. And those relieve so much stress in terms of the will it hold moments. So maybe we'll do a video on those later. Now, I'm also going to throw print quality into the pros section, and that's perhaps the single most important thing, let's be honest. Is it spitting out better prints than my Bamboo P1S, X1C, or even A1 bed slinger? Honestly, it's pretty dang close. When comparing print quality, I'm going to strive to do one thing on this channel, and that's sticking to stock. Because yes, you can tweak various settings to fine tune your prints, but I think it's more important to compare what you're getting out of the box, because that's where the industry is heading. More and more people just want something that works and that they have to put very little effort into. And that might be frustrating if you're a purist, but also in my own experience, once you get down the rabbit hole that is 3D printing, you naturally start to get the urge to learn more and more about how you can make your prints better, regardless of if you initially got into it just expecting to stick to plug and play. But for the purposes of this video, let's keep in mind that I'm loading prints into OrcaSlicer. At most, I'm changing things like wall count and infill, and then running with stock settings and generic profiles. And I've gotten some really stunning prints out of these things. The K2 Plus has handled everything that I've thrown at it, including these gorgeous silks. And one area where it has had the edge for me over my bamboos is in filament runout. For whatever reason, when I reach the end of one spool and load the next onto any of my bamboo machines, I almost always get a discernible line on my print where this happened. But on the K2 Pluses, nothing. Seamless transition, even when the printer has been paused for multiple hours. And that's huge for me because it means I don't have to waste that piece. The K2 Plus has also produced some beautiful multicolor prints for me, like this Black Panther helmet from Vec 3D. And this one completed under some not so ideal circumstances, because at some point the prime tower got knocked over and I just was not willing to restart this 3-day monster, so I let it ride. And surprisingly, it turned out great. And that brings us to the other big selling point on the K2 Plus, which is multicolor and the CFS. And talking about the CFS is going to be a great inflection point for this video, because I have both good and bad things to say about it. First, and I guess sort of anecdotally, the one CFS unit that I have has generally had less issues than the 2 Bamboo AMSs that I have. And those AMSs are older, but the issues that I typically have on them, I've always had. The CFS has given me less trouble, and when it has given me some attitude, it has usually been easier to fix thanks to Creality providing for easier access to the PTFE tubing underneath of the unit. Perhaps one of the things that is annoying about the CFS and the AMS is their inability to handle non-standard spool sizes, though. But I think I'm more frustrated with the filament makers than Bamboo or Creality on this one. Just like on my AMS, I do have to print various spool rings or buffers for the CFS to accommodate some filaments like Sunlu, which is a big disappointment because I use Sunlu nearly exclusively for their great price point. The CFS has also not been completely and totally a little angel, though, and that might be a good segue into the not so great section of this review. CFS-wise, I have had a couple of mainly retraction issues on this machine, and it's hard to say what's causing those. On my AMS units, it's typically a failure point in the angle of the PTFE tubing as it enters the tool head, but that doesn't seem to be the case on the CFS. And after I've managed to yank back the filament manually, there doesn't really seem to be a failure point in the travel path that sticks out to me. But what does stick out are these little areas along the filament where it seems to have gotten chewed up. And that's where the gears are no doubt getting stuck in an inability to rewind the spool. Now, I've seen some stuff online about the springs underneath of the unit being a potential cause for this, but I haven't yet reached my boiling point of tearing my hair out and ripping it all apart to try and solve an issue that is happening relatively infrequently for me. On the software side, the CFS also really struggles to get purge volumes right. Now again, that's not a hardware issue, but Creality has got some massive figuring out to do in order to resolve color swapping. I have to move to a 2x multiplier most times to stop color bleed, and that's really affected my print times. It's also just guesswork that I don't really want to have to worry about when I'm dialing in a long print. On the printer side, I have had a bit of a saga unfold. First, you'll remember that I said I have 2 of these machines. The first one I bought directly from Creality, and the second I picked up off eBay about a month later. If you've stayed current on the K2 Plus news out there, you'll know that there were a whole host of issues with shipping and logistics on these guys. Packages were massive and they're super heavy, something like 85 to 90 pounds, if I remember correctly. So people's printers were showing up with pretty noticeably a couple of issues: a broken door hinge and or a broken foot or two. For my first K2 Plus, it came in immaculate condition, and that made me breathe a really heavy sigh of relief because I had neither issue there. My second printer wasn't so lucky. It did have the detached lower door hinge, but luckily that didn't really affect my ability to start printing with it, and Creality Support sent me a brand new door assembly that arrived within a week. Outside of that, my second K2 Plus has had literally zero issues. It's also the one that has been exclusively running single color prints off of the side spool, for what that's worth. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same thing about the first K2 Plus, which is this guy right here. Remember, this one came in perfect aesthetic condition, but it wasn't long before some issues started. First thing that happened was the magnetic sheet delaminating from the bed. And this was really a frustrating issue since the entire front left corner of the bed started to raise up during prints. As a workaround, I started positioning models strategically so that they wouldn't be affected by the misleveling that was no doubt occurring due to this issue. But that was also effectively cutting out a quarter of my build volume. I did some research into this issue that yielded the fact that some other folks were having similar issues. Again, a quick connect with Creality Support, and they sent me an entire build platform as a replacement. I ended up just using the magnetic sheet from that kit, and I haven't had the issue since. So it does seem like the adhesive used by Creality might not be the best in some cases. I'd much rather see Creality move in the direction of simply making the whole platform magnetic in the future, and that way we can just avoid this type of variable issue. The other big issues I've had are extruder related. Dun, dun, dun. And unfortunately, this seems to be the major pain point across the various K2 Plus owner groups right now. The first issue that I had was a wonky one where the filament sensor remained triggered even when there wasn't any filament loaded. On this one, I was literally ripping my hair out because I tore down that extruder so many times looking for clogs and anything else, and I just couldn't crack it. In a stroke of luck, I stumbled on someone else that had found out that the issue was a teeny tiny, barely noticeable metal pin that somehow got stuck underneath the metal contact point that it was actually supposed to be sitting on top of. I mean, this thing is almost microscopic, but once I pulled that back to the top, the issue was fixed. Hallelujah. I've also experienced an issue that seems to be one of the most prominent right now as people have put more and more hours on these machines, and that's a failure of the pneumatic fitting on top of the extruder. Especially with continued use of the CFS, where your printer is constantly feeding and retracting filament, the tiny metal teeth that are supposed to grip the PTFE tubing are prone to breaking, and that's a big problem because then the tool head can no longer hold the PTFE in place. This issue has been so prominent that many have taken to designing and printing adapter plates and modding their extruders to hold a better fitting. The problem is most of these still require drilling out that old fitting and also using a more heat durable material to print that part. And I'm really just a PLA guy, so I don't have anything like that lying around the shop. Luckily though, again, Creality Support has come through. They sent me a replacement extruder within a week or two. I know that some people have had really rough luck with getting replacement parts, but at least in my experience, Creality Support has been on it. Hopefully though, they realize the fault with their extruders and they push out an upgraded part soon to more permanently address this issue, because until then, I feel like I need a backstock of extruders on hand at all times, and that's just not very convenient. And really that's it in terms of the negative that I've experienced with this machine. There are a couple of additional annoyances that I have, like the power button being on the rear. I normally have these on the bottom of an industrial shelving unit, like one you can get from Lowe's or Home Depot. And it can be a real pain to reach around the back there to get to the power button or to clear waste blockages too. But neither of those things are actual mechanical issues, just my own problems. And that's going to be a wrap on my experience thus far with the Creality K2 Plus. I hope that you found this video helpful, especially if you are considering pulling the trigger on one of these. Would I buy another one? Absolutely. Stay tuned for more videos like this one. Make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss them. And let me know what you think down in the comments. Happy printing, y'all.